Hello there everyone, this is Dr. Schroeder with this week's video introduction to week number 6 in our course in nursing research. And things continue to go very quickly. We're getting down to really just the last few weeks of class here. And another really good discussion in week number 5. This week the primary task, of course, besides doing your quantitative critique, which everybody should have submitted before the weekend, the primary task this week was to discuss the different populations or the target population in this rather large study that we looked at, this hospital staffing study, the Aiken et al. Study, and talk about the target population, the sample population, and a lot of questions came up about um, the way the study sample was actually selected. And just a few things to point out. I had brought them up in the discussion forums as well. But just to kind of wrap up, this is a very large scale study. This is a study that was commissioned to look at or try to identify if the state of Pennsylvania is essentially having the same issue with nurse burnout and poor patient outcomes based on rather high patient to nurse staffing ratios. And the idea at the time was that maybe that Pennsylvania may want to do the same thing that California did and come up with a law that says that the nurse can only take care of so many patients at one time. And so that was really the sort of the main impetus for the study that was described in the study purpose. The questions that exist though is that since this was a study that surveyed included a total of a quarter of the nurses in the state of Pennsylvania, which is a very large percentage of a target population. How far can you extrapolate these results? Can we say the target population is one that is larger than just the nurses in Pennsylvania? And the answer is really kind of it depends. When you have a study population, oftentimes the researchers won't identify specifically what their target population is. They'll identify it, and here the most specific target population was nurses in Pennsylvania. The way we can derive that is because all the subjects were from Pennsylvania. There was no effort to go outside of that geographic area, so that technically was the target area. However, when you have 10,000 plus nurses in the study, from a variety of different practice areas, you may be able to extrapolate these results out to other areas where the demographics are essentially the same or very similar. At least as far as correlation goes, you could not really do a regression analysis for nurses in another area. You couldn't do anything predictive, but you could say that, the nurses in Pennsylvania, they're pretty similar to the ones in Missouri and pretty similar to the ones in Ohio and maybe the ones in Maine. Colorado or New Mexico, I'm not so sure, but in these areas where we know that they are very similar, you might be able to extrapolate it out and say that you could derive a larger target population. That's really up to the reader of the research to really decide that. You're the ones that have to decide, does this pertain to me or doesn't it? However, when it comes to the actual sample itself, the way the sample was chosen, one of the questions that came up in class was it a simple random or just a random? How could you best define it? And the actual selection process was very specifically a simple random method. Every nurse in the state, we're assuming, had the same chance of being selected for this study as every other. A total of 50% were recruited, and assuming that there was a nominal method of selecting the subjects either by just every other name off of a list, or taking the last numbers of their license numbers, and from 0 to 4 was in one cohort and 5 to 9 was another, and would take all the 5 to 9s, and or there's any ways to do that to make sure that you're getting a truly random sample. And since every nurse in the state did have a random shot at it, we can say that it was a simple random survey. However, the research did not really specifically say that's exactly how we did it. And the reason they didn't, I'm sure, is because you would have a difficult time arguing that this is truly a simple random selection method, simply because they were contacted by mail. they were notified by mail about this particular subject or this particular study, and some maybe had moved. Some perhaps don't open up mail that they think is unsolicited mail that looks like it's just an ad. Since it could be argued that not every nurse that was contacted maybe had a equal shot at necessarily getting a chance to respond to the survey. They didn't go into great detail about how they'd actually selected those nurses. They felt that it was just good enough that we contacted half of them, and half of the half that we contacted responded, or a little over 25% of the nurses of the state. It's a very large percentage, and so it does lend a high degree of reliability and confidence to the study results. And so anyway, I just wanted to wrap that up and kind of clarify that a little bit, because those questions had come up in the discussion forums. Overall, very good discussion this week too, by the way. The discussions continue to be excellent. I've been really happy to get in and have a lot of fun getting in and participating in class along with you. Week number 6, we continue this discussion of our talk on target populations, and we move to a different study. This is a study that is different than the Aiken study, not nearly as large a scale. Bring it up here real quick. It is a study that was done looking at Taiwanese patients, and to review what these or the phenomenology about the hemodialysis patient in a Taiwanese population. This is a qualitative study, not a quantitative, and so therefore the sampling is different. The way that we select our samples is different than when we have a quantitative study, and that's really the focus here. So you're going to discuss the sampling plan. Was the sampling plan adequate? Was the sample adequate? What would you do differently? What would are the results from this study transferable to other populations, or strictly to this one that was reviewed? Again, kind of a similar topic as last week, with a little bit of a different focus, a different type of study, and a different population. And so that really is the task for the week. So I once again look forward to participating in class along with you and participating in the discussion forums. Your quantitative critiques, I would anticipate that they should be finished by the weekend. And then, of course, you'll be working on your qualitative critique. Those will be due next week. So I look forward to seeing you in class. I hope all is well. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. And I will look forward to seeing you in the discussion forums.